What is going on, people? Triple M back again with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about the absolute embarrassment, the calamitous performance by Spurs yesterday evening, which to me all but confirms that they are in serious trouble. And honestly, I believe they will actually get relegated. And I'll explain why in this video following the North London derby, if we can even call it a derby, because at this point I think we need to find a new word to call this game, because it ain't a derby. It is not a rivalry. This is so one-sided that I feel like calling it a derby is almost disrespectful and dishonest, because that was an embarrassment. And there's so many aspects of Spurs as a football club at the moment, to me, that make them legitimate candidates for relegation, apart from the fact that they're obviously close to the bottom point-wise. This is more than just a mathematical equation. There is so much pieces of evidence for me that suggests that this team is not going to make it. And yesterday's game was symbolic of everything that is wrong with Tottenham Hotspur as a football club. Because when you look at that performance, honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a match this one-sided in some time. I mean, Arsenal had double the XG that Spurs had, essentially double the shots that Spurs had. In fact, more than double, because they had 20 shots to Spurs' 6. They created several big chances, I think 6 to be exact. And that's not counting the half chances. That's not counting the amount of time they spent and the touches that they had in Spurs' box compared to the other way around. And for me, the most worrying aspect of yesterday's game, if you're a Spurs fan, is two things. The first thing is that Arsenal weren't even at their best. Arsenal genuinely didn't even look that good. If I'm being honest, I don't think was a great game at all for Arsenal. I just think Spurs were that bad that they made Gyökeres and Eze, like they always do, look world class. The second thing, and probably the most worrying thing, is there were several moments in that game where Igor Tudor was screaming on the touchline for them to play certain passes, for Mickey van der Ven to play a higher line, and a couple of other instructions in terms of when Spurs were on the ball. He was asking them to play the simple pass. There were so many opportunities, whether it was Xavi, whether it was Paulina, whether it was Gallagher. They had opportunities, a clear, wide open pass out wide. And for whatever reason, they decided to play through the middle, or they decided to switch to the opposite flank. And your manager was losing his mind. And I understand it. I understand it. I completely and utterly understand it, because it feels like, for me, as a neutral, watching the Spurs team, that they don't respect this guy. They're not listening to him. They're not paying attention to him. And more importantly, they themselves are just completely and utterly fumbling the basics. There were so many moments in yesterday's game where Spurs panicked needlessly. First of all, Vicario with the diving header when he could have just kicked it. He had more than enough time and space to kick it. The diving header was so dramatic. He did a good job coming out. But there was that early moment in the game, I don't know if you remember it, if you actually watched the game, where bizarrely Vicario comes charging out for a ball that, yeah, it's a dangerous ball, but there wasn't really a striker close by. There wasn't really an Arsenal attacker close by, at least not close enough that it forced him to specifically go for that option. Because a diving header with a ball that's just bounced and essentially lost most of its momentum, you're not really going to clear that far away. And then you still have to get up off the ground and hope that that second ball or that loose opportunity doesn't fall to an Arsenal player, so they can essentially have a free shot on net. Granted, it would have been a difficult shot anyways, but just so many moments like that. I saw so many moments where Gallagher, Paulina, who, by the way, is a signing that I don't even understand, which I'll talk about in a moment, and even Xavi Simons were just so indecisive. They were panicking needlessly. There were moments where Spurs could genuinely just play through Arsenal's press and build up slowly and gradually and try to hold on to the ball to take out some of the momentum from Arsenal. But instead, they chose to play hoofball. Every single time they chose to hoof it forward, which makes no sense because they don't have an outlet. Kolo Muani is not an outlet. He's not a tall, strong, physical striker that you can use as a target forward to play long ball. It just doesn't make any sense. None of what Spurs tried to do yesterday make any sense. And the only reason I feel like it isn't on the manager is because I feel for the manager. I saw him screaming time and time again for Paulina, Xavi, for Gallagher to make the simple pass, and they didn't. For whatever reason, they just chose to pick the wrong option. I think Jed Spence was the only player who deserves any credit, any form of credit, as far as that Spurs performance is concerned, because everybody else played like complete and utter donuts. It was an awful performance, and it's not just that one game. Obviously, we all know how Spurs have been recently, but it's, for me, their next few fixtures. Because in my last video, I said if they got a result against Arsenal, perhaps they won't get relegated, because the level of confidence they would have gained from that, for me, would have been paramount to their survival. But you look at the upcoming games for Spurs, you look at the pressure they're going to have. Obviously, Nottingham Forest didn't get anything out of their Liverpool game, and I thought they were very unlucky not to. And I don't really know when West Ham's next fixture is or who they play against, but I genuinely believe between now and the end of the season, West Ham and Nottingham Forest will pick up more points than Spurs. Because Spurs are going through an injury crisis at the moment. They have a manager who I feel like the players don't really respect and are not really responding to. Yes, it's only one game and we'll see how it develops. But considering this Tottenham team finished where they finished last season, I believe 17th in the league, coupled with how bad they've been this season, coupled with the fact that they're in a relegation battle, which they've never been in before, at least not in the modern era. None of these players are used to being in a relegation zone, and none of them joined Tottenham thinking they were going to be in a relegation zone. All of that impacts the psychology of these players massively. And yesterday, some of the poor touches I saw had nothing to do with skill. They had nothing to do with talent. You can tell me that Dragusin's a bad player. You can tell me that Spence is not that good. You can tell me that any one of the players who played for Spurs yesterday is not that good. And I would agree with you. But I don't think these players are playing to the level that they can. I don't think they're this bad. And nobody can convince me otherwise, because some of the things that I saw yesterday had nothing to do with individual talent. It was pure basics. All Xavi had to do was just look around and scan. Yes, he was isolated a lot of the time, and I completely get that. But there were times where he wasn't isolated. There were times where he genuinely had a pass to play, and instead, he decided to hesitate. Xavi looks like the type of player for me who plays as if his team is 3-0 up all the time. He has no urgency. He has no sense of instinct. He always wants to take an extra touch. And in a league like this, where you don't get a lot of time and space on the ball, you can't afford to be taking needless extra touches, especially when you're chasing a game, let alone in a North London derby. But any game against any Premier League team, you just can't be hesitating like that multiple times across both halves. Coupled with the fact that Spurs don't really have any other players who are capable of progressing the ball or distributing the ball, it just compounded the issue. Gallagher, for me, was a terrible, terrible signing. And I can't believe there were Man United fans actually saying we should have signed Gallagher. Shame on you for such a horrible take, because Gallagher, for me, is just a lawnmower. He's a cardio footballer. That's all he is. He offers nothing in terms of progressing the ball up the pitch. Breaking up the play, working hard, and doing a job, great. But for a team that's fighting for relegation, I don't think he's the guy they needed. And even if Spurs were further up the table, I would still push that, or hammer that point home. Because outside of Maddison, who does Spurs really have in the midfield who can play that creative role? They don't have anyone. They don't have anyone. Even in the build-up phase, they don't have anyone who can receive the ball from the back four and distribute it up the pitch. And that is, for me, their biggest problem. And then Xavi, on top of all the issues that he has as an individual, to be fair to him, he is isolated a lot of the times. Because for some reason, Spurs players don't show for the ball. They don't offer each other support. It's almost as if when a Spurs player gets pressed, teammates are just like, hey, dude, that's your problem. You get out of it. That's how it feels to me as a United fan watching the Spurs team. You look at their upcoming fixtures. Fulham away is going to be a horrible, horrible fixture for Spurs. I mean, even without their injuries, even if Spurs had some of their stronger players, I would say this is a hard fixture. Now that is exacerbated by the fact that they are completely decimated at the moment in terms of injuries. They don't have any of their best players, especially in the attack. Crystal Palace, that's going to be a tough game. Liverpool, obviously, needless to say, that's going to be a tough game. And based on how Tottenham have performed against the Big Six in general this season, because they lost to us, they lost, obviously, to Arsenal, and I think they lost to Liverpool in the first fixture. So I think Liverpool will comfortably take this win. Then they're going to play Nottingham Forest, who, for me, are a lot more equipped psychologically to deal with this relegation battle. Again, I don't think these Spurs players, a lot of the newer ones especially, I don't think Xavi Simons signed for Spurs thinking he was going to be in a relegation battle. He doesn't have that dog in him. He doesn't have that fight in him. Spurs have too many nice guys, as far as I'm concerned. And yesterday, it's funny, because they tried to do the passion thing with the fouls. You know, there were so many fouls from Spurs players, but that's just not enough. Fouling people is not enough. You actually have to do something at the other end. You actually have to score goals. And then you have to be able to defend. And then you have to be willing to listen to your manager and fight for your team, which these players don't seem like they're willing to do. I honestly think if you're a Spurs fan and you're focusing on the manager after that one game, you're doing a disservice to your football club, because those players should absolutely hang their heads in shame. And the reason why Spurs will ultimately get relegated, apart from the issues with the ownership, apart from the issues with, obviously, their lack of continuity between managers, I think another big reason is that the players are just too soft mentally. They can't deal with this pressure. That's my honest take on Spurs. I think when I look at these fixtures and I also look at the current table, it's just too much. It's way, way, way too much, man. So just having a look at the table here, I think Spurs are now only 3 points away from relegation, if I'm not mistaken. Well, actually, it's still 5 points, but assuming they lose their next game and assuming West Ham or Nottingham Forest pick up points, I think that gap will shrink from 5 points to 3 points. For me, that feels all but confirmed. And now, granted, West Ham aren't that good, but they are better than Spurs at this point in time. I think that's a prediction I'm going to make. I think West Ham stay up. I think Nottingham Forest stay up. And I think Spurs will ultimately go down. They just don't have the minerals. They don't have the minerals. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Arsenal obviously deserve a lot of credit for the way they played yesterday. It's a good response against Wolves. From the game against Wolves, pardon me. Eze, again, as he always does, really good against Spurs. And I think Mikel Arteta will start to show a bit more faith in Eze. I think the way that he's treated Eze is a bit harsh, if I'm being honest. I think that Eze, a big part of why he struggled at Arsenal is because he just hasn't been given that confidence, the same confidence that Odegaard has been given, because Odegaard starts every single game, regardless of how badly he played the previous week. If Eze just had that for a run of 10 to 15 games, I think Arsenal would see a different Eze. I think Eze still needs to acclimatize to life at a big club. People will say, oh, but he's been playing in this league for a long time. Yes, but playing for Crystal Palace, with all due respect, is not the same as playing for a team that's in a title race. It is not comparable. The way teams defend against you is not the same. The time and space that you have on the ball is not the same. The pressure, the level of scrutiny from the media and alike is not the same. I just don't understand how people genuinely don't get that. Like, playing for a big club is not the same as playing for a mid-table club. And so I think Eze, for me, will get better at Arsenal. I think he's a quality player. And I think that he will get better. Granted, it hasn't been the best of first seasons, but I think the performances that he's shown in the North London Derby alone, for me, should be an indicator that there is something there for Mikel Arteta to work with. Coupled with the fact that I don't think Odegaard has actually been that great. I think Eze is a better solution to Arsenal's creative problems right now than Odegaard, because Odegaard has been so bad for so long. At least give Eze the opportunity to be as bad as long as Odegaard before you completely write him off. I don't know. That's just me. I know some of you will disagree. Gyökeres, still not convinced by him, but hey, he scored, and it was a delightful goal. But to be fair, Spurs played right into his hands. I don't think the rest of the Arsenal team was that great, if I'm being honest, and that's not me trying to discredit Arsenal or say that it wasn't an important win, it wasn't a good performance. It was, but let's not pretend like they were playing against prime Barcelona. At the end of the day, I think Spurs were so unbelievably bad, and for me, it goes beyond the injuries. It goes beyond the level of quality in their team. It goes to the fact that I saw so many instances where they just weren't doing the basics right. They don't look like a Premier League level team. They look like a team that just came from the Championship mid-season and was just dropped in and with no experience, with no idea of how to play in the Premier League. That's what it looks like to me. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you made it this far, please subscribe to the channel if you are new. And as usual, it's been your boy Triple M. Peace!